are the Packers set up for a Super Bowl run with these new picks? Stay tuned as we unpack the draft to discuss how these selections and undrafted free agents can and will make a difference this season. Make sure to stick around until the end to hear who we think are the most surprising picks are from the 2024 draft and to hear our draft grades.
I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm Kesha. I get to the paper, boy.
Welcome in, everybody, to Sounds Gouda, episode 2. Thank you so much for coming on and listening to us. I am one of your two co-hosts. My name is Rob Ralph. Beside me is my best friend, Jordan Olson. We're so excited to have you guys here for us today. We're going to go through a couple things for today, including talking about the Packers way and approach to the draft. Did Goody give us the blueprint to the draft? And some final draft grades and surprising picks. So a lot has happened since the last time that we talked. We had a draft, right? Pretty exciting. I'll go ahead and give just a recap of our draft and the players that we selected, along with the relative athletic scores. So Jordan Morgan from Arizona, offensive tackle in round 1, pick 25, 9.25 relative athletic score. Edgerrin Cooper, Texas A&M, linebacker, round 2, pick 45, 9.13 RAS. Javon Bullard, Georgia, free safety with our second round pick at number 58 with 8.25 RAS. Marshawn Lloyd, Southern California, USC, running back, round 3, pick number 88 at an 8.62 RAS. Tyron Hopper, Missouri, linebacker. He's our third round pick at number 91 with a 7.42 RAS. Followed up by Evan Williams from Oregon, a free safety in round 4, pick 111, 8.2 RAS. After that, Jacob Monk from Duke, offensive center prospect in round 5, pick number 163, 9.74 RAS. After that, Katan Aladapo from Oregon State, free safety, pick number 5, pick number 169 with a 8.18 RAS. Next up, Travis Glover, Georgia State, offensive tackle prospect, round 6, number 202 with a 4.71 RAS. Followed up with Michael Pratt, from Tulane, a quarterback, pick round 7, 8.28. After that, we got Kalen King with our last pick out of Penn State. He's a cornerback. Round 7, pick 255 with a 6.68 RAS. So with that, let me jump it over to Jordan to be able to give you some updates on some players, the jersey numbers, as well as some undrafted free agents.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I get most excited about every year after the draft is kind of trying to guess and see what numbers these players are going to wear. Is it the number they wore in college? Can I see what spots or what numbers are available on the roster? So we have some updates. Jordan Morgan got number 77. That was his college number. So I think Kadeem Telfort had that. So I don't know if they had some kind of gentleman's agreement or whatnot, but pretty cool that Jordan Morgan is going to get that number. Edgerrin Cooper, how cool would that have been for him to have number 45, as he was number 45 in college and pick number 45 overall in the draft. However, that number's occupied and he's going to get number 56. That is a cool number for linebackers, though. If you're a Packer, Nick Barnett and Julius Peppers wore that number. So hopefully he can kind of carry the weight or the prestige of those two players and be the next great Packers linebacker to wear that number. Javon Bullard, number 20. I was kind of hoping that Robert Rochelle might give him number 22, but I guess he's got enough veteran status to hold on to that number. Marshawn Lloyd, number 32, great classic running back number. I was kind of hoping that Marshawn Lloyd would be the first Packer to wear number 0 in history, now that that's a permitted number in the NFL. I just don't think that's how the Packers handle business. They don't like to give out number 1. I think that's honorary for Curly Wright. But I think they kind of try to avoid some of those flashy out-of-the-box numbers. And then Tyron Hopper, number 59. I'll talk about this more later, but he kind of reminds me of Devondre Campbell, and he's got that number, so we'll see how that turns out. A couple of UDFA pickups that we got. Obviously, after the draft ends, the work doesn't end. Those Goody and his scouts and staff are out talking, trying to secure a few more players to come in and compete and fill out the roster. So a few of those guys. Right now we have 8 offensive lineman Donovan Jennings from University of South Florida, another offensive lineman Trent Jones from Michigan, defensive lineman James Esther from Northern Illinois, tight end Messiah Swinson from Arizona State, defensive tackle Rodney Matthews from Ohio, a long snapper Peter Bowden from Wisconsin, which I think most people think is the number one long snapper coming into the professional ranks this year. Linebacker Raylan Goforth from Washington, and a running back from Elkhorn State, Javon Bullard. And for those of you who may or may not know, we've had another late round Packer that was famous from Elkhorn State. Who is that, Rob?
Yep, Mr. Donald Driver himself.
Yeah, nailed it, right? 7th rounder, I think 97 draft, right? And we know all about Donald Driver. So, a couple players I'm excited about. Donovan Jennings. I think he'll come in and get a chance to compete at guard. He was a top 30 visit. They gave him a contract, I think, with a $10,000 signing bonus, which is not usually how the Packers handle business. Clearly, they wanted to secure his services, and he had mutual interest too after his visit, right? And then I mentioned Peter Bowden. It's been a revolving door at long snapper since Brett Gouda has ended his tenure with the Packers, so maybe Bowden can shore that up, and maybe be the next guy in that position for 8 to 10 years. So we are recording this a little earlier in the week, right? So by the time you listen to this, there might be more players added. We might have a few more roster numbers. Really, anything we're talking about this episode could be updated at that point in time. So just keep that in mind as you listen and continue to listen. So kind of time to jump into some of our main topics or points of emphasis for today's episode, right? So one thing I wanted to talk about is kind of falling in love with the prom queen, right? I think every year, and what do I mean by that? Every year, us passionate Packer fans, we get really excited about mock drafts, and we're some of the most educated and loyal fans, and we're hitting PFF and PFN mock simulators, and we're looking at all the national media, right? Especially these last couple weeks. Cooper DeJean is just in our face, right? And I mean, for us, Graham Barton, even Chop Robinson's name was out there a bunch, right? So then we get to the draft, and we get to that moment, and we've got Cooper DeJean, we've got Graham Barton there, we've got other players we like, and we're like, it's happening, right? Everything is falling our way. We're gonna get this guy, and we
That's what I
pick
thought.
somebody else. Yeah, exactly, right? My family's blowing me up. What are we doing? Packers Twitter's blowing up. We take Jordan Morgan, though, right? And this is not a criticism of Jordan Morgan, but more a criticism of, I think, this concept, right? We fall in love with the prettiest girl at the dance, the popular girl with a nice smile, or guy that's super charismatic, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I've got my opportunity. I'm going to take my shot, and I missed it. And we all get super upset about that, right? But Goody doesn't care about who the consensus draft board says should be our pick, or how many times it's been mocked, and that's been proven over and over again, right? Eric Stokes, Quay Walker, now Jordan Morgan. We pick these guys, above about 15 or 20 spots above their consensus spot on the draft board. And that doesn't matter, because I think that Jordan Morgan figures that he's the best player that can come in and maximize the roster right now. Last year, I think everybody's draft crush, including my own, was JSN. We're going to get JSN, the best slot receiver. We got Jaden Reed instead, which I hope that you love as much as I do.
I think we're all happy with that one.
Yeah. And, Luke Van Ness, there's another project. Hopefully he turns out like Rashawn Gary. The talent is there. But that was at least an appropriate draft slot, right? He was projected to go right there, 13, 14, 15, and even mocked to the Packers quite a bit. So one other point that I'd like to add, right? I think every year there's only about 15 to 20 blue chip prospects in a draft, right? That means that after pick number 20, The first round grades truthfully end for some of these teams. Some of these teams might have a few less, some of them might have a few more. I'm going to say that Jordan Morgan probably was in that group for the Packers because they selected him. And if he wasn't, he was at the top of the list of the guys that the blue chip prospects were gone. So things about him, he's been regarded as the second best guard prospect coming out of this draft. Coming off an injury in 2022, otherwise I think he would have certainly been a first round pick set in stone coming into this draft. Made 37 starts at left tackle for Arizona, two-time All Pac-12 player in 22 and 23, two-time team captain, and we know our Packers love team captains. That was a theme throughout this draft. Started games at left tackle during all 5 seasons at Arizona. The Packers love experienced players, 2 or more proven years of experience. Matt LaFleur says he's a left tackle, right? So even though everybody in the national media is profiling him as an interior player right now, the Packers love the idea of failing at tackle and failing into guard, right? So if he truthfully is the second best guard, we're in a really great position, right? Because he's probably going to play through 2 or 3 contracts, maybe be a Pro Bowler. I think if we get a 10-year guy that's a 2-time Pro Bowler, nobody's going to be complaining about this pick. Couple notes, like I took this from ESPN, right? He's got big hands, tough to beat when he gets inside and pass protection, has balance and body control to mirror and recover, and also walls off defenders well in the run game, right? He has short arms, and may need to move to guard, but he has the frame and skill set to quickly develop as a starter there. One note about the arm length, I don't think that the Packers care about arm length as much as the rest of us do. He has ideal, I guess not ideal is the wrong word, but almost identical arm length to what Zach Tom has, which they're like a quarter or an eighth of an inch shorter, right? So, and clearly that hasn't been an issue at tackle for him. So, just some things of note. But my parting note on this segment is Packers fans, next year, let's try to expand our draft crushes maybe into like the 40s, right? And I think we stand a little less chance of being disappointed initially and a little bit more excited about that prospect that we take in round 1, because I have a strange feeling that that's how they'll continue to handle business in the future. So kind of segueing into some of the other Packers way of doing business, right? Rob, why don't you talk to us a little bit more about some of the other things that they did in this draft that align with traditional Packers standards?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, Goody did exactly what he told us he was going to do, even though that we had all our draft crushes, including me. I loved myself some Graham Barton. He was sitting there at 25 for the right picking, and I thought for sure that that was going to be the one. It wasn't. I fell in love with that prom queen. Ended up, I left the dance with another girl. But he created with that pick. He created a lot of versatility, a lot of competition. He's got a lot of versatility. Excuse me. Who knows what's going to happen with Rasheed Walker? I can't imagine that Rasheed Walker is going to give up that spot willingly. So that's going to be a really good competition. And like you said too, if he doesn't make it there at left tackle, there's other spots depending on what they do on the line. They could be a competition with Sean Ryan. If they kick Zach Tom by chance into center, which has been some conversation here recently, he could have a spot there over on the right side as well. So it just gives him a lot. Again, the theme throughout what Goody has said in the pre-draft process is just they want to create competition, and then they want to have versatile linemen. That's all over the board. You have that with Elton Jenkins, Zach Tom, right? So I think that this is an excellent pick, and it creates a lot of good competition along with all the other offensive prospect picks, Jacob Monk and Travis Glover, that we took in this draft as well. So not only that, but even going back from before, triple dipped. He triple dipped at safety. I remember the last time, when we were picking Aaron Jones, we had 3 running backs in that class. And when we were picking MVS, we took 3 wide receivers at that class. Even last year, right? Double dipped at tight end. We really needed some tight end players there too. And so we got Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So he got some really good safeties there. Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Katan Oladapo. and that positional group is just going to be so much fun to be able to watch. And they definitely wanted to overhaul that position, and that's exactly what they got. So then they move into the late rounds in familiar fashion, right? They take a flyer on a Travis Glover with a 4.71 relative athletic score because they like what they saw on his tape and how he performed at the Senior Bowl. You alluded to it earlier too, but one other theme I wanted to say too is they love their captains. I believe 5 out of the 11 picks were captains, and they had 2+ years of experience starting, at least, if not more. I know Jacob Monk had 5 years starting at offensive center, right guard, and I believe tackle. So they love people from the Senior Bowl. They might come into that not even knowing anything, right? The scouts just want to see them come in and play throughout those couple of days and that weekend. And if they perform, that's going to put them on the map. And especially if they're captains. If they're captains, you have a really good shot of being able to get drafted by the Packers. Also, too, top 30 visits. We know they love their top 30 visits. So moving forward, that'll be, some of my criteria for me to be able to see, okay, were they at the Senior Bowl? Were they a top 30 visit? And were they captains, right? Check, check, check. There's a really good chance that they could be drafted to the Packers. But even just going from round 7 and on, getting a Kalen King out of there, he was projected to go as high as the first round this year before the season, and then his play dramatically dipped there at Penn State. You look at other people like Rasheed Walker, who had a 5th round rating before last year. Carrington Valentine, a 4th rounder before last year. So they just had a lot of really good picks, a lot of good versatility, and a lot of good competition. Jordan, would you add anything to that I might have missed?
Yeah, a couple other things of note, and I think besides the 5 guys who were captains in college, right, I think I had read or heard that 2 or 3 more were multi-year captains in high school, right? So they're looking
That's
for
awesome.
that leadership. I think that you get a guy like that, you probably feel pretty good about injecting them into the locker room, especially people that you poured early resources into, right? So I think that's great. Another observation that I'm sure is I'm not alone in is that the Packers are starting to really fall in love with their West Coast guys. Big credit to the West Coast scouts.
Sam Seal.
What his name? Sam Seal. But Sam Seal has spent extensive time scouting the Mountain West and the Pac-12, and you can see the amount of players and impact players that have come to the Packers via the Pac-12 or the Mountain West in the last 10 to 15 years. Jordan Love, Romeo Dobbs.
Yep, Devontae Adams.
Name a few more.
James Jones. Yep, Jordan Love, right? Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Jordan Love, then you got your Pac-12 guys. You've got, Kenny Clark and Sean Ryan and Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Catano Ladapo this year, Evan Williams from Oregon, right? So they're mining these guys out of the West Coast. They love them. They trust those scouts. We're not seeing a lot of players drafted to the Packers out of the SEC. Of course, we have some here and there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But you see a larger percentage of guys coming from that area. So just in future years, let's keep an eye on our West Coast players, right? And I guess I don't know what happens with the Pac-12. I guess that might become a Big Ten, part of Big Ten scouting now, as that landscape changes, right? So just kind of, Rob, you want to talk a little bit more about Packers' approach to filling out their depth chart this year and some of those spots? I feel really good about where we're at versus where we started now. We had some pretty significant holes and we filled most of them now. So where do we stand in terms of our depth chart?
Yeah, depth chart is looking good. As always, you say after the draft, Brian Gutekunst's draft, a lot of depth there at offensive line, safety, as we just alluded to and talked about. And then we didn't talk about it yet, but the linebackers, right? Edrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, Tyron Hopper out of Missouri. That comes in right away, especially in a 4-3 defense, considering if you're not going to be a nickel and you're not going to have 2 linebackers out there, that will be really good playmakers for them. So I think that that's really good. I think that we are going to be set there, and they're going to come in and immediately be able to try and play, depending on what happens with Isaiah McDuffie, specifically on the linebacker side. But yeah, Goody said exactly what he told us what he was going to do, and he gave us answers to the test. Jordan, right? Like they drafted a quarterback. He told us he's looking at drafting a quarterback, and we all knew it was coming. And Michael Pratt from Tulane, who went out and beat Mr. Caleb Williams, I might add. So just a shot there. But what are some other things here too that you thought that they did that might be pretty good, Jordan?
I mean, he talked about versatility and competition over and over again, right? Like if you
That was
listen
the
to
theme.
his press conferences, right? And not only on the offensive line with guys like Jordan Morgan and Jacob Monk, but our safety room, right? He went out and not only in the draft, but in free agency, he brought a lot of versatility to that group. If you look at the linebacker room too, I do think that Tyron Hopper is a versatility pick in the fact that he's a big special teams contributor as well, right? So if he can play if he's a four-string linebacker this year behind Isaiah McDuffie, I think he's going to be a huge teams player, and hopefully somebody Bisaccia will lean into as a core guy for the next few years. So, just a couple other notes about like the roster fill out in general. I think that there was some conversation about wanting to add a different type of running back, and I'm going to talk about Marshawn Lloyd here more in a little bit. I do think he's a great complement and created a lot more competition in that room as well. We'll see what the future has in store for A.J. Dillon. I would love to see him get back to the form that we anticipated, especially in front of a line that has been solidified and hopefully stronger now than it was before the draft. But really those last 5 or 6 games last year, that group was clicking. And I'm really excited to see this running back room going into 2024. So
Yeah, and obviously I think it's pretty evident from this draft too. Cornerback room is looking really solid. He has a lot of faith. Matt LaFleur said it in the press conference. Eric Stokes is good. There hasn't been any football. There's been off-season training programs, but he must have figured out, or at least on track to figure out the stuff that was going on with his hamstring. Fingers crossed the same thing as we know that they were both seeing some specialists there at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So, and that's evident by him taking a cornerback with literally the last pick in this draft. So pretty exciting stuff.
And I'm not even sure they took a corner with the last pick in the 7th round because they felt like they needed to add there as much as they just like, if Kalen King plays like he did in 2022, we've got a steal on our hands, right? And, you talked a little bit about them looking for those steals in round 7, and I think we got 2 more this year. But kind of getting into talking about some of our favorite picks of this year's draft. Rob, who were a couple of the guys that you were most excited about that we took?
Oh man, Edrin Cooper, Texas A&M. I know we needed a linebacker. I was like, okay, well they might not go out and get one in free agency, especially with the Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs signing. But man, he was the number one inside linebacker, at least on Rob's prom queen draft board that I fell in love with, and he was literally the first inside linebacker taken. But that man is fast. He is sideline to sideline fast. He's just as fast as Quay Walker, if not faster. So it all just depends on where they want to play him. Do they want to play him at Mike? Do they want to play him at Will? I can't imagine he'll play the Sam or the strong side. I really do feel like Isaiah McDuffie is the prototypical Sam linebacker in a 4-3 defense. But as soon as you put on some tape, and I'll just say, go watch Edrin Cooper's tape from the Alabama game. Unbelievable. Alabama is just a top-notch program in the SEC. He really flashed, and that's where he got a lot of attention, I'm sure, from the scouts. Could not be more excited to have him in our linebacker room and to see what him and Quay, Isaiah McDuffie, and Tyron Hopper can do. So just one other one real quick, too, before I let Jordan take over. I'm getting some of these really easy slam dunk picks. So Javon Bullard, literally with our next pick, just an absolute dog, a Georgia Bulldog and a dog. That guy just gives so much versatility. He's known as a free safety, but they lined him up at nickel when there's been 3 wide receiver sets or more. He can play down in the box. I think Jeff Hafley will be able to use him and disguise both him and Xavier McKinney interchangeably, whether you're in one high shells, 2 high shells coming down in the box, which one's coming, which one's staying back, or is it both staying back? I think he's going to be able to give a lot of versatility, and he's going to be able to push some guys like Keyshawn Nixon along with some other ones in that quote unquote big nickel position there for these offenses. But Jordan, go ahead and talk about some of the players that you loved coming out of this draft.
Yeah, a couple items of note there. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll see how things turn out, but I actually think Edrin Cooper is going to end up as the Sam coming out of camp, because I just see Quay having the green dot in year 1, right? And I do think Isaiah McDuffie plays downhill, but I see, I don't know. I have Cooper pegged for that strong side. I think he's going to attack the line of scrimmage, and I'll be excited to see what happens in that room.
Absolutely.
Javon Bullard, I think he's going to be a nickel really in this scheme, and I think Gouda even said kind of again, if you really take stock in what he's saying, the 2 safeties that we drafted in this class, and I know I kind of borrowed this from another podcast I heard, so I won't try to take credit for it on my own, but I do think since day 1 that we drafted him, his versatility plays well in that nickel spot. And I think the 2 other guys are going to compete for strong safety. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to put Bullard and McKinney out there on a lot of snaps and move them around, which I think is 100% what's going to happen. But if we can get Keyshawn Nixon off the field, and he didn't do a bad job, but if we can upgrade that with Bullard, we're in a really good spot. So
sign me up.
Sign me up. Hey, sidebar note. I actually, listening to player interviews this year, I am getting a little sick of the term dog and chip on my shoulder, because it's like the new leadership phrase, like I'm a leader, right? Like every player's like, I got a chip on my shoulder, I'm a dog. So like, all right, we get it, guys. You're all dogs. But that's no discredit to your analysis, Rob. But that's just an observation to see as we move forward how many of those buzzwords get used by 90% of these guys when they describe themselves. We'll see if it shows up on the field.
I think from now on moving forward, I might start calling everyone a dog just to piss Jordan off.
Yeah, you would too. So Marshawn Lloyd, right? So one of those West Coast players I was talking about, I'm really excited about him, what he brings to this running back room, his combination and ability to be paired up with Josh Jacobs, the ability to catch out of the backfield, average 7.1.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you feel like he is almost like a carbon copy? He's the same weight. He's about 2 or 3 inches shorter, but he looks like Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, and you know what? Some of his agilities and 10 and 20-yard splits were like almost identical too. I think he's got a little bit more side to side than Josh Jacobs. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
I think his NFL comps so far at a more national level have been DeAndre Swift, which, I mean, that would be a great pickup, but my bone with DeAndre Swift is I had effort questions with him, and even as I watched Hard Knocks, like a couple seasons ago, you could tell the coaching staff was really trying to push him, which is why I think he wasn't a Lion anymore at that point in time. Had a great year with Philadelphia last year, but hard to not have some Aaron Jones comparisons at a more local level too, with the way that he can cut, jump cut, get sideways, and then get down the field. So, excuse me, everybody. So, at USC last year, he had over 1,600 rushing yards. At South Carolina, he had over 1,600 rushing yards, 19 rushing TDs, 34 catches for 452 receiving yards, and 2 receiving scores across 32 games and 14 starts. Last year, as I was trying to say earlier, he averaged 7.1 yards per carry and scored 9 touchdowns at USC, South Carolina. So he played for both USCs, just went from coast to coast, right? But even though he played over a number of seasons, those limited starts actually, I think, leave some tread on the tires for him. So excited about him. And then I won't spend too much on this one, but Rob took the slam dunks, but I do love where we got Michael Pratt. We got him in the 7th round. He was projected to be a top 100 pick at one point in time. 22 years old, 6'3", 220. He's got above average arm talent. Actually scored, really well on RAS, 8.28. I mean, he's got a 36-inch vertical. So he's an athlete. Did well in the short shuttle and free cone as well. I think he's somebody that's going to come in and push Sean Clifford for that backup job, and at a minimum, can be somebody that if he shows well in the preseason, probably can flip that 7th-round value into a 4th or 5th-round, pick a couple years from now. Or best case scenario, he becomes a backup for Jordan Love and, is a long-term Packer as well.
He has an interesting story too that I was just listening to about as well. He had his best friend that passed away from high school by committing suicide, and he wears the number 7. We believe in 7 on his bicep. And then I think like a year later, he lost his brother-in-law or something as well. Just super sad story, but just some more context into a little bit of Michael Pratt and sort of the person who he is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story, and makes it even easier for us to all cheer for him to do well in green and gold next year, right? So
yeah,
we'll get on to our draft grades here, and get you onto your day or your night or whenever you're listening to this pod, right? But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give the Packers an A- for their draft. I think that they've gotten beaten up a little bit on some players that they've taken that were well overvalued or undervalued, however you want to say that, right? Like players that some people would consider to be 2-round reaches. Evan Williams, Jacob Monk, and Tyron Hopper all in that group. Couple reasons for why I give it a high grade. I do like Jordan Morgan. I think he's a long-term starter. I do think that day 2 was a home run between Edgerrin Cooper, Javon Bullard, and Marshawn Lloyd. I think those are 3 long-term impact Packers. And if you're looking at getting 4 starters and maybe a couple of Pro Bowlers in there, I gotta say that's a pretty good draft, right? I think I'm a little higher on Hopper than most. I think he, at worst case scenario, is probably a future, starter for us in year 3 and 3-4, and an impactful special teams player. Another guy that his tape was a lot better in 22. So if you can go back and, like Jordan Love, Romeo Doubs, some of these other guys who fell off a little bit in their last year in college and get that production, really mine that out of him, we might have a player. He also reminds me of Devondre Campbell in a lot of ways. And if we get a Devondre Campbell type without the extra baggage that comes along with it, I think we get a really good player there. Couple criticisms, though. Taking Glover over other Packers types. I know he's a late round pick, but at that point in time, we had Jalen Sundell and Tyler Grable, who went 2 picks later to the Bills. I would have loved to have him, as I said in our pre-draft video. You've got 2 players there that I think translate immediately and probably aren't as much of a stretch. So that's a negative, mark for me. And then if I had it to do anything else, I would have flipped the Williams and the Oladapo pick around. I would have been really comfortable with Oladapo in the 4th round, and if you picked Williams in the 5th, that would have made me feel better about that. But we somehow landed both of those players. We get Oladapo, which is one of my draft crushes. And that's my surprising pick, because after they picked Williams, they went back and they picked Oladapo. I think that they thought they might have been done with the safety room. They passed on a guy who most thought was a higher rated player. And then we went back and got him, right? So could also make a case for Hopper or Monk just due to the overdrafted value in those spots. But super excited to have Oladapo on the Packers next year. So Rob, how did you grade this thing out?
Yeah, so I have a hard time giving anything an A because to me that's almost perfect. And I'm not hammering on what you're saying, or I know we're both biased, but still a B plus, which is pretty damn near close to, might as well be an A. Love the Jordan Morgan pick. I obviously thought that was going to be Graham Barton. my crush, my prom queen crush, but it ended up being Jordan Morgan. I feel like those two players obviously slightly different in some metrics and thresholds, but almost the same player. A lot of versatility, and he went literally the pick right after that. So really love that pick, and I love securing the offensive line along with the rest of the depth, especially Jacob Monk. We'll have to see what Travis Glover brings to us because he was a later on pick and might not have scored as well in the relative athletic score. But, the theme from it, too, was just creating competition. You saw what happened last year in the wide receiver room with the tight ends. It went off to a little bit of a rocky start. But then the second half of the season, man, they were cooking. And obviously we made that great playoff run, almost beat the 49ers. So love that, too. And I also just love the speed and versatility, being able to do multiple different things with these guys. Like you were saying with Javon Bullard, he's probably going to be a big, a nickel, but they could pair him back there. I think Hafley is going to be able to do some really unique and creative things with some of these picks, and creates good competition to see who can come out and be the best ones on our team. And my surprising pick, I could have gone a lot of different ways, but I love myself some Kalen King. I will thoroughly admit I did not know too much about him. I thought that the name sounded familiar. I remember he was getting a little bit of hype from his last year's performance. But then this year it dipped off quite a bit. So I love myself some Kalen King. I really do feel like that could be another Carrington Valentine. And as injuries happen throughout the NFL season, I guarantee he'll be able to step in and be able to have some snaps and see what the kid can do. But so far from what I'm viewing and what I viewed on the tape, I think he's going to be awesome, and he's going to have some playing time to be able to prove it, I'm sure, at some point this year.
Yeah, definitely, Rob. We didn't get a lot of time to talk before this pod, and and my own thoughts about process and stuff too. I'm not backtracking from my A-, but from a process standpoint, I might lean a little bit more into your B+, right? So I think you're spot on with that grade, and as I reflect on it a little bit more, I probably feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But I do love the picks. If I could grade the picks alone, or most of the picks of the alone minus maybe 2, right? I love these guys, and I'm excited to see what they can do. So,
and really too, like Jordan, we won't know for a couple of years, right? Or maybe a year this year, at least for the first few picks. It's all subjective. It's based on how these players perform throughout the next couple of years that ultimately determine whether it's a really great draft or not. So just wanted to add that piece in.
For sure. Well, Rob and I both wanted to thank you for being here, listening or watching this podcast. This is episode number 2 for us. The next few episodes we'll be breaking down these picks and also take a look around the division. So we plan to highlight our first 3 selections in our next show and take a look at division rival Minnesota Vikings, see how their draft did or how they did in their draft. Maybe where they're at with some of their key free agent additions or losses, and take a basic look at their schedule, right? We can start to see how they're feeling and looking this off season. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you're on YouTube. Let us know what you think. Drop your comments, and we will love to interact with you. You can also connect with us on X. So Rob's handle on X is Robbers79, ROBBERS. You can get at me at Olson Jord, OLSONJORD. But yeah, that's all we got. So in case we don't see you again, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Signing off.
Later, Packers fans.
I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better.